He planted the evidence, sneering at the elderly soldier's clean record. A perfect frame-up. But the dashcam was silently recording his every move. He wasn't just framing a hero, he was directing his own downfall. The 3 p.m. bell at Lakewood Elementary chimed, releasing a joyous flood of children onto the sun-dappled sidewalk. In a modest but impeccably maintained Ford Crown Victoria parked across the street, Command Sergeant Major Isaiah Washington, retired, watched the scene with a soft smile. At 72, his face was a roadmap of a life lived with purpose, his posture still ramrod straight, a relic of 30 years in the U.S. Army. The harsh lines around his eyes, burned in dusty, far-flung conflicts, would soften only for one person. Grandpa. A little girl with a bright purple backpack and 2 bouncing pigtails broke from the crowd, her face alight with pure joy. "There's my sweet girl," Isaiah's voice, a deep and gentle baritone that once commanded thousands of soldiers, was now reserved for her. He got out, his movements deliberate but fluid, and walked around to buckle his granddaughter, Maya, into her car seat, listening intently as she chattered about a classroom squirrel. It was a ritual of profound peace, a slice of the quiet life he had earned. But as he settled back into the driver's seat, that peace was shattered. A large police SUV, moving with aggressive speed, swerved in front of his Ford, blocking him in. The door swung open, and Officer Cologne Mercer stepped out, his stocky frame filling the space, one hand resting on his duty belt in a gesture of casual authority. Isaiah's hands remained on the steering wheel. He did not get out. He did not speak. He simply waited. "This your car?" Mercer's voice was flat, devoid of courtesy. Isaiah nodded slowly. "Yes, it is." "Is there a problem, officer?" Mercer ignored the question, his eyes scanning the vehicle, then landing on Isaiah. It was a predatory gaze, searching for a flaw, a reason to pounce. "You know you can't park here during school dismissal." "I wasn't parked, officer. I stopped to pick up my granddaughter," Isaiah explained, his tone even. "We were just about to leave." Mercer's eyes drifted to Maya in the passenger seat, her excited chatter now silenced, her small hands clutching her backpack. The officer's gaze lingered for a moment before returning to Isaiah, a flicker of something ugly, a decision already made, crossing his face. The ordinary afternoon was over. "License and registration," Mercer said, the words a curt command. Isaiah complied without a word, retrieving the documents from his glove box and passing them through the open window. His movements were economical, free of any sign of nervousness or agitation. He was a man who had faced down threats far greater than a bitter patrolman with an attitude problem. Mercer took the documents but didn't look at them. His focus was entirely on Isaiah. "Step out of the vehicle, sir. I need to conduct a safety check." "On what grounds?" Isaiah asked, his voice still quiet, yet possessing an undeniable weight. It wasn't a challenge, it was a request for order in the face of chaos. "On the grounds that I told you to," Mercer retorted, his temper fraying. "Now." Isaiah gave a final, reassuring glance to his granddaughter, whose wide eyes darted between the two men. Then, with a slow exhale, he unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out of the car. He stood tall, hands visible at his sides, a picture of calm compliance. This dignity seemed to infuriate Mercer even more. "I'm going to check the car," he announced, already opening the passenger door and leaning inside. His flashlight beam swept across the spotless interior. The car was old but meticulously cared for, no trash, no clutter, nothing suspicious. But Mercer wasn't looking for evidence, he was delivering it. In a practiced motion, smooth from repetition, his right hand dipped into a hidden pocket on his tactical vest. His fingers emerged clutching a small, clear plastic bag containing a white, powdery substance. With his body blocking the view from the street, he quickly and silently tucked the bag deep into the gap between the passenger seat and the center console. The entire act took less than 3 seconds. He straightened up, his face a mask of performative shock. Well. "What do we have here?" he shouted, loud enough for nearby parents to turn their heads. He reached back in and triumphantly pulled out the bag he had just planted. "Thought you were just a sweet old grandpa. Looks like you're running a little business on the side." Isaiah didn't look at the bag. He didn't look at the gathering crowd. His gaze lifted slightly, past Mercer's shoulder, to the small, circular lens of the dashcam mounted on his own windshield. His expression remained unchanged, but a silent message had been sent. Mercer, blinded by his own arrogance, saw only an old man he had successfully cornered. He raised his radio to his lips, a smug smirk on his face, ready to call in his victory. The interrogation room was a sterile, soulless box of cinderblock and steel. Command Sergeant Major Isaiah Washington sat perfectly straight in a hard plastic chair, his hands resting calmly on the metal table. He had been stripped of his belt and shoelaces, standard procedure, but they could not strip him of his bearing. He hadn't said a word since his arrest, hadn't asked for a lawyer. He just waited, his breathing even, his gaze fixed on the two-way mirror as if he could see right through it. Officer Mercer sat opposite him, filling out the arrest report with theatrical flourish. He scribbled, paused, and smirked, crafting a narrative of a belligerent suspect and a heroic discovery. Subject was uncooperative, he wrote. Showed signs of nervousness. Every line was a lie, a brick in the wall he was building around his frame-up. Meanwhile, in the property clerk's office, a different story was unfolding. The clerk, a young man named Carter who had served 4 years in the Marines, was methodically cataloging the contents of Isaiah's wallet. He logged the cash, the credit cards, the photo of a smiling Maya. Then his fingers brushed against something hard and metallic in a worn leather slot. It wasn't a card. It was a coin, heavy and ornate. Carter slid it out. On one side was the striking image of an eagle superimposed over a dagger and a delta symbol. On the other, the motto, De oppresso liber, to free the oppressed. Carter's breath caught in his throat. He had seen coins like this before, but only in pictures. It was a challenge coin from the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta Force. These weren't given out, they were earned in blood and secrecy. They were carried by the most elite soldiers in the world. This silent, elderly man wasn't just a veteran, he was a legend. Shaken, Carter quickly logged into the system to review Mercer's bodycam footage of the arrest, needing to see it for himself. The footage showed Mercer confiscating the wallet. It clearly captured the moment Mercer's own fingers found the coin. The video showed him pause for a fraction of a second, look at the coin, and then, with a contemptuous sneer, shove it back into the wallet and into an evidence bag. He never mentioned it. He never logged it. In his report, the wallet's contents were listed as cash and miscellaneous cards. He hadn't just framed a veteran, he had deliberately concealed the man's honor. Carter felt a cold dread creep up his spine. This wasn't just a bad arrest. It was a desecration. Rookie Officer Trevor Banks couldn't shake the image from his mind, the old man's ramrod straight back even as the cuffs were tightened, the little girl's silent, terrified eyes. He had witnessed the whole thing from his post across the street. He had seen Mercer's aggression, had seen the discovery of the bag that felt so staged, so wrong. All shift, his gut had been churning with a toxic cocktail of fear and shame. He knew what he was supposed to do, nothing. He was supposed to forget what he saw, to trust the report of a senior officer, to protect the brotherhood. But the face of that old soldier haunted him. It wasn't the face of a criminal. It was the face of his own grandfather, a man who taught him the difference between law and justice. That night, long after his shift had ended, Trevor sat in his car in the empty station parking lot. The dashcam video from Isaiah's car was already the subject of hushed rumors in the department. The official story was that it was inconclusive. But Trevor knew better. He knew that video was everything. His hands trembled as he pulled out his personal phone. He thought about his career, the years of training, the dream he'd had since he was a boy. Reporting a fellow officer, especially a veteran like Mercer, was professional suicide. He would be labeled a rat, an outcast. He would be pushed out, his life made a living hell until he quit. The system was designed to crush people like him. Then he thought of Isaiah Washington again, standing tall while a lesser man tried to bury him. He thought of the little girl. What kind of man, what kind of cop, would he be if he let this stand? The silence was a weight, pressing down on him, suffocating him. He knew he couldn't live with it. With a deep, shuddering breath, he made his choice. He opened a secure, anonymous email client he hadn't used since college. He found the website for a prominent civil rights law firm that had been retained by Isaiah's family. He didn't write a long message. He didn't sign his name. He simply attached the small video file he had managed to copy from the evidence server during a moment of distraction in the tech room. The file was labeled ds_1138.mp4. He wrote only one line in the body of the email. The truth is in the car. He hit send. The small whoosh of the email leaving his phone sounded like a cannon blast in the silence of his car. There was no going back. He had just set a fire, not knowing if it would illuminate the truth or burn him to the ground. The video file arrived like a lightning strike in the offices of Isaiah Washington's legal team. The lead attorney, a retired Army JAG colonel named Hannah Siegel, watched the footage with a cold, rising fury. The video was undeniable. It was a crystal-clear recording, from an interior-facing camera, of Officer Mercer planting the evidence. It was the kind of smoking gun lawyers dream of. But Siegel knew this was bigger than one corrupt cop. The system didn't just allow a man like Mercer to exist, it protected him. The anonymously leaked video was their key, and they used it to unlock a door someone had tried to bolt shut forever. Siegel's team, comprised of young, hungry investigators and paralegals, began digging. They filed motions, subpoenaed records, and soon, another anonymous email arrived. This one was from a source deep within the police department, a former officer who signed his message, "A ghost you created." He guided them to a series of old, seemingly unrelated arrest reports filed by Mercer and a small clique of other officers. As they laid out the reports, a chilling pattern emerged. The language was eerily similar. In over a dozen cases involving minority suspects, especially veterans, the narrative was almost identical. Subject exhibited uncooperative behavior. A search revealed a suspicious substance under the passenger seat. Subject failed to provide a reasonable explanation. It was a template, a fill-in-the-blanks recipe for a false arrest. The investigators realized Mercer wasn't just a rogue cop, he was a participant in a systemic practice. They cross-referenced the names of the officers involved with internal complaints and found a common thread: they were all members of an unofficial, off-the-books social club within the department. A club known colloquially as the Shield Brothers. It wasn't a gang, it was a pact. They covered for each other, verified each other's false reports, and intimidated anyone who dared to question their methods. The brotherhood, that was supposed to represent honor, had been twisted into a shield for corruption. Hannah Siegel looked at the mountain of evidence, the damning video, the templated reports, the testimony from the anonymous ex-cop. She saw the full picture. They weren't just defending an innocent man anymore. They were putting a whole system on trial. The puzzle pieces were all there. Now, they just had to assemble them in front of the world, in a place where even the Shield Brothers couldn't hide, a court of law. The preliminary hearing was designed to be a swift, public humiliation. The prosecutor, confident and smug, played still photos from the arrest for the judge and the packed courtroom gallery. He showed a close-up of the bag of white powder. He showed Isaiah in handcuffs, his face turned away. The evidence, the prosecutor declared, is clear and overwhelming. Isaiah Washington sat at the defense table, impassive and dignified. His attorney, Hannah Siegel, let the prosecutor finish his presentation without a single objection. She let the narrative of guilt settle in the air, thick and heavy. Then, she stood. "Your Honor," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "The defense would like to call a surprise witness to the stand, Officer Trevor Banks." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Officer Mercer, sitting with the prosecution, visibly stiffened. Trevor walked to the stand, his face pale but his jaw set with determination. After he was sworn in, Siegel asked him one simple question. "Officer Banks, were you present during the arrest of Sergeant Major Washington?" "Yes, ma'am, I was." "And did you witness Officer Mercer discover evidence in the vehicle?" "No, Ma. I witnessed him plant evidence in the vehicle." The courtroom erupted. The judge hammered his gavel, calling for order. The prosecutor leaped to his feet, shouting objections. But it was too late. "And do you have proof of this stunning allegation?" Siegel asked calmly. "Yes," Trevor replied, looking directly at the jury. "I do." "Your Honor," Siegel announced, "the defense submits into evidence Exhibit A, the complete, unedited dashcam footage from Sergeant Major Washington's own vehicle." Over the prosecutor's frantic protests, the judge allowed it. The courtroom lights dimmed, and the large screen flickered to life. The entire room watched in stunned silence as the 4K video played. They saw Officer Mercer lean in. They saw his hand dip into his vest. They saw the small bag appear in his palm. They saw him expertly tuck it under the seat. And then they heard his voice, loud and clear, shouting in feigned surprise, "Well, well, well. What do we have here?" The video ended. The lights came up. No one spoke. The prosecutor slowly sank into his chair, his face ashen. Officer Mercer stared blankly at the screen, his mouth slightly agape, a man watching his own ghost. Hannah Siegel stood tall. "Your Honor," she said, her voice ringing with the clarity of truth. "The defense rests." The judge slammed his gavel. "All charges against Mr. Washington are hereby dismissed with prejudice. Officer Mercer, you are to be taken into custody immediately pending a federal investigation." The system hadn't just been challenged, it had been broken open, live, for the entire world to see. The courtroom video went viral before the sun set. It played on every news channel, every social media feed. The story of a decorated hero being framed by a corrupt cop ignited a firestorm of national outrage. Veterans organizations, civil rights groups, and ordinary citizens flooded state representatives with calls and emails. The Shield brothers were exposed, and the department was thrown into chaos. In the midst of this whirlwind, Isaiah Washington remained a figure of quiet strength. He gave no fiery interviews. He sought no revenge. Instead, he accepted an invitation to speak before the state legislature. He walked to the podium not as a victim, but as the command sergeant major he had always been. He carried no notes. He looked out at the assembly of lawmakers, his gaze sweeping over them, and he began to speak. His voice was not loud, but it filled the chamber with an unshakable authority. "I am not here to talk about myself," he began. "My story is just one of many. I am here to talk about the system that made my story possible. A system that allows a man's honor, earned over 30 years of service, to be threatened by one lie and a plastic bag." He didn't demand apologies. He proposed a solution. He laid out the framework for a new piece of legislation he called simply, Isaiah's Law. The law was clear, concise, and revolutionary. First, it mandated that any complaint of misconduct against a veteran by law enforcement would be automatically investigated by an independent, civilian-led oversight board, not by internal affairs. Second, it made planting evidence against a protected class, including veterans, a federal hate crime, carrying severe mandatory sentences. And third, it established a duty to intervene clause, legally protecting and rewarding officers like Trevor Banks who report misconduct within their own ranks. The opposition was immediate. Some legislators called it an overreach, an attack on police morale. But Isaiah stood his ground. "You speak of morale," he responded, his voice still even. Ask the soldiers who have served this country if their morale is boosted when they see one of their own treated like a criminal. This law doesn't attack good officers. It protects them from the bad ones who hide behind the same shield. His quiet conviction, backed by the immense pressure of public opinion, was a force they could not withstand. The debate raged for weeks, but the tide had turned. Isaiah's law was no longer just a proposal, it was a movement. The vote was close, but it passed. It was a victory born not from a battle of weapons, but from a battle of will. Weeks after Isaiah's law was signed, a grand ceremony was planned in the state capitol. It was meant to be a public tribute, a moment to officially honor the man who had turned his own ordeal into a force for change. The governor was scheduled to speak. Medals were polished. The press gathered. But when the time came, the guest of honor's seat was empty. Command Sergeant Major Isaiah Washington was not there. He was across town, sitting on a small chair in a brightly lit third-grade classroom at Lakewood Elementary. The children sat cross-legged on the floor, looking up at the old soldier with wide, curious eyes. He didn't talk about laws or courtrooms. He didn't mention police or prejudice. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket. It was the heavy, ornate challenge coin from his time in the Army's most elite unit. He held it up for them to see. This coin, he told them, his voice warm and gentle, was given to me because I was part of a team. On that team, we had people of every color, from every corner of this country. We didn't always agree, but we always trusted each other. We had to. Because our lives depended on it. He passed the coin around, letting each child feel its weight. True honor, he continued, isn't about medals or parades. It's about how you treat the person next to you. It's about choosing to see the good in them, especially when they look different from you. That's the most courageous thing you can ever do. He stayed for an hour, answering their simple, profound questions. As he was leaving, a little girl tugged on his sleeve. "Are you a superhero?" she asked. Isaiah knelt down to her level, a soft smile creasing the lines around his eyes. "No, sweetheart," he said. "I'm just a grandpa. And I'm trying to leave the world a little better for you." His legacy would not be his name carved on a plaque, but a lesson planted in the hearts of children. His greatest victory wasn't won in a statehouse, it was won in a classroom, with a simple coin and a story of trust, ensuring the next generation would know where honor truly belongs. The story of Command Sergeant Major Isaiah Washington is more than the chronicle of a false arrest, it is a profound lesson in the nature of true strength and the quiet power of integrity. It reminds us that justice is not always found in the thunder of a gavel or the roar of a crowd, but often in the unwavering dignity of a single individual who refuses to be broken. Isaiah's journey shows that the most formidable weapon against systemic prejudice is not anger, but a calm and unshakable belief in one's own worth. He did not need to raise his voice, because his character spoke volumes. But the most vital revelation is that change is never the work of one person alone. It is a chain reaction of courage. It sparked to life with Officer Trevor Banks, who chose conscience over career. It was fueled by the preserved evidence from Darius Hill, a man the system tried to erase. It was carried forward by the tireless work of a dedicated legal team and ultimately solidified by 3 legislators who chose to listen to the people rather than to political pressure. Isaiah may have been the catalyst, but the victory belongs to everyone who refused to stay silent in the face of wrongdoing. This is the story's deepest truth. A system only remains corrupt when good people decide their silence is an acceptable price for their comfort. This story asks us to look not just at the screen, but into the mirror. It challenges us to question what we value, the loud authority of a uniform and a badge, or the quiet honor of a life lived with principle. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that prejudice often wears the mask of procedure, and injustice is often codified in the fine print of a report. Isaiah's ultimate choice, to forego accolades in favor of teaching children, is perhaps the most powerful lesson of all. It teaches us that true victory isn't about winning a single battle, it's about shaping the hearts and minds of the next generation to ensure the war never has to be fought again. And now, we turn the question to you. Have you ever been misjudged or underestimated based on a first impression, only to quietly prove them wrong? Have you ever witnessed something you knew was wrong and felt that difficult pull between speaking up and staying silent? What does real strength and courage look like in your daily life? Share your story and your thoughts in the comments below. We believe every voice matters and ask that all discussions are conducted with mutual respect. If you believe in the power of quiet courage and that our veterans deserve honor, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story that reminds us of the hero within us all.